just to introduce ourselves. So we're the Critical Political Economy Research Network of the European Sociological Association. My name is David Bailey, and we have various other members and some who haven't joined us before on the screen. And basically what we did at the beginning of the pandemic, we started having these monthly sessions to give us an opportunity to keep our discussions going, and they've been enjoyable, I think. So we've kept going, and obviously the pandemic has also kept going. Hopefully it will stop at some point. And so this month, we're very pleased to have our session on fraternal capitalism with Bhabani Shankar Nayak, who will discuss his new paper, Fraternal Capitalism, Microfinance and Microcredit Networks of Self-Made Social Servants, a qualitative study of fraternal capitalist accumulation in rural Odisha. And Bhabani is a political economist and a professor at the University for the Creative Arts, and his research interests include political economy, South Asia, the market, microfinance, faith, and the Hindu religion and capitalism. And his 2017 book, Hindu Fundamentalism, which is one actually of several recent books, Hindu Fundamentalism and the Spirit of Global Capitalism in India, focused on the relationship between the rise of Hindu fundamentalism and mining-led capitalism, while evaluating the impact on the new economic reforms on tribals and their social, cultural, and religious identities in Odisha. So in this paper that we're about to hear now, we'll be considering Odisha again, but from the perspective of microfinance and microcredit networks as a framework for capitalist accumulation. So we're very pleased that Bhabani could come and speak with us. The themes are definitely of interest to our research network, which is around capitalism and how to understand it. But the regional focus, I think, is new to several of us in the network. So we're very pleased that you come and speak to us about the case of Odisha in India. So thanks very much. I think we said about 30 minutes for the talk, and then we'll have Yuliya to give her comments as the discussant. And Yuliya, who I think we all know anyway, because she's the one of the members of the CPERN board based at the University of Greenwich. So thanks to you both, and Bhabani, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Yuliya, for organizing this session, and I'm thankful to all members of Critical Political Economy Network, Research Network, for organizing this session. So today what I'll do, I'll try to tell you a story of microfinance, story of capitalism, how it works in the rural areas of Odisha, and how small savings of working class people are being tapped by the global capitalist framework, and particularly these institutions, those who tap the small savings of the working class people, are based in US and in Europe. And we'll try to develop that network, how small savings are being tapped, and how the mountain of credit is being expanded to accumulate capital based on fictitious finance, that is credit per se, and how microfinance institutions, NGOs, civil society organizations, governments, both national and provincial governments, promote such a framework where poor people suffer, they give their savings and get under the mountain of credit. So let me share my slides to talk. I think the host disabled participant screen sharing. If you can allow me, I can share.
Sorry, I've just given you permission now, so you should be able to. How's that?
Yeah, I'm trying to do that. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, that looks perfect.
Okay, great. So particularly what I'm going to do, how microfinance and microcredit network of self-made social servants. Why do I call this network as self-made social servants? Because one of the social justification they give that we are serving the poor. And who are these people? These people are lawyers, unemployed lawyers. These people are highly educated network people. These people are the managers of NGOs and civil society organizations. They try to claim that they're the self-made social servants, social servants of the poor. And these people play a central role in expanding microfinance through their microcredit networks. And that helps capitalism to accumulate in rural Odisha. And it establishes, we always talk, Marxists talk about, capitalism and competition, but here we see there's a fraternal relationship between the people who are being exploited and people who exploit them within both within the structure and regimes of capitalist accumulation process. Those of you who don't know Odisha is one of the Eastern Indian state, and the state, particularly it's a home state for me. I was born and brought up here. If you look at Odisha, it's a state that reflects paradox of plenty. It has 4.7% of India's landmass. It is one of the 8th largest state. It has 6.34% of irrigable land. It is in terms of India's population. If you look at, in terms of population size, it is one of the 11th largest state in the country. It is equivalent to Argentina actually. And in terms of poverty, 85% of rural population live with, less than $1 a day. And out of 85% of rural population, nearly 40% of people are below poverty line. So in terms of its population composition, most of the people in the state, around 22% of people are scheduled caste, scheduled tribe people. Scheduled tribe means the indigenous communities, tribal communities, and they're all 17% population belongs to scheduled caste. Scheduled caste people are the lower caste people within the Hindu social order. There are Brahmins, there are Kshatriyas, there are Sudras, and there are Vaishyas, and the lowest of the lowest belongs to the scheduled caste. This is an administrative term used by the government of India for its own purposes. It has a colonial history. I'm not going to talk about it. So in terms of Human Development Index, Odisha stands 22 out of 23 states. In India, that means Odisha suffers from immense poverty in terms of so-called development index, which I don't believe in. 33.11% loss in Human Development Index due to inequalities in the state. In terms of resources, it has 27% of coal. In India, it has 33% of iron ore, 55% of bauxite stays in Odisha, 92% of nickel belongs to the state, 95% of chromite in India based in Odisha. It has a 480 kilometers coastline. Agriculture contributes 21%, industry contributes 17% to the state GDP, and service sector contributes around 62% of the GDP. So you can see you have the resources and you have the poverty. So it's a resource-rich state with poor people. That defines Odisha. It's a paradox of plenty. And I don't know when the prosperity will flow from the top-down approach, followed by the capitalist model of development that India and the Odisha follows for a long time. The microfinance and microfinance institutions networks comes as if it is going to cure the poverty that the state and its people suffer within Odisha. And most of the people based in Europe, they think that microfinance, is a product of, Grameen Bank revolution in Bangladesh. And Muhammad Yunus, the Nobel laureate, who is the founder of Grameen Bank, is the messiah of microfinance. He started microfinance. But in reality, if you look at microfinance institutions in India, there is a religious lineages, there is a religious foundation of microfinance institutions in India. The Manusmriti, which is one of the seminal texts of ancient India, religious text, we call it Laws of Manu, which was composed between 200 BCE and 200 CE, which talks about political and economic and religious administration. It's basically a text of governance. How do you govern the society? 8th chapter of Manusmriti the laws of Manu. Rule number 140 talks about money lending. It talks about, the capitalists, those who invest capital, have right to increase the profit, and this profit is based on interest. And in 41, rule number 41, it says that, there is nothing seen about charging higher interest rates. So there is nothing wrong if if the capitalist class try to increase interest rate for their own profit, and it's not a sin. Only sin is socialism, by the way. Socialism is a crime and it's a sin. But when it comes to making money, when it comes to charging higher interest rate, it's all fine. So basically, Manusmriti outlined the structures where how much capital can charge interest, what is the interest rate for 100 rupees, or how much interest rate you can claim for 1,000 rupees. So it's all structured. So this again differentiates within the caste order. How much money you can charge as interest for the Brahmins, how much money you can charge for the lower caste people. There's a structural analysis within Hindu's religious order, Hindu social order based on caste. Lower caste people tend to pay higher interest, and the higher caste people tend to pay lower interest as per Manusmriti, as per the laws of Manu. There's another seminal text of ancient India called Kautilya's Arthasastra. It is a treatise. It's a text on public administration, on statecraft, on economic policy, on military strategy. The last chapters of Arthasastra, Kautilya's Arthasastra, the text on economics, that deals with loans, deposits, mortgages, and recovery. And this text was written during 350 to 283 BC. So these texts are considered to be religious. It has a religious connotation, but you can summarize these two texts as the text that governs the society. It sets the foundation for economic governance. It sets the foundation for political governance of the country based on religious rules and regulations within Hindu social order, within Hindu religious order. So these religious foundations, these two texts institutionalized the whole process of circulation of capital and transaction of capital, both in terms of commercial transactions, normal transactions, where you can charge higher interest. For example, Kautilya's Arthasastra says the lawful rates of interest for different purposes shall be: normal transaction is 1.25% per month, 15% per year. Normal commercial transaction is 5% per month, 60% over year. If the commercial travels involves risk and travel through the sea and forest, then it is, interest rate can be 10% per month and 120% per annum. Commercial transactions with risky travel by sea, it can go up to 20% interest rate per month and 240% per annum. So the whole, circulation of credit, circulation of capital was institutionalized through Kautilya's Arthasastra. And, one can charge higher interest rate if the state or the king is unable to provide security. In such a case, the judges can decide the customary practices among the debtors and creditors. So therefore, you can see that the institutionalization of circulation of capital, the institutionalization of microfinance and circulation of credit and saving continues to continues to exist in India today, not in the same terms, but there is a religious lineages, medieval religious lineages that continues to govern the country's economic policy till today in terms of microfinance. So how did these self-help groups, microfinance institutions and network started growing in Odisha? There is a very good text by Susan Olcott called Microfinance in Colonial India, A Skeptical History. where she outlines that microfinance actually used by the British state in the form of rent-seeking approach. But in the post-colonial India, from 1947, India got its independence in 1947. From 1947 to 69, the cooperative movement started taking shape, and that led to the rise of All India Rural Credit Survey, and that led to the report led to the nationalization of banks and expansion of institutional finance and banking. Banking was confined within the cities and urban areas. The nationalization of banks led to the expansion of banking in the rural areas. And microfinance institutions today, they say that they provide financial services to the people who are not within the formal banking system, those who are not bankable in terms of institutional banks, mainstream banks. So from 1969 to 1991, we see the rise of nationalization of banks and expansion of institutional financing. From 1980s onwards, there were, grain bank for food security, seed bank for agricultural security, community fund and formation of committees such as village health committee, joint forest management committees. And sometimes these associations, these organizations set up by the government were led by the NGOs and civil society organizations. Then we saw the creation of NABARD, National Bank for Rural Development, National Bank for Agricultural and Rural Development in 1982. And after 1982, the major shift of Indian economic policy took place in 1991 when the new economic reforms were implemented. New economic reforms were composed of three policies of liberalization, privatization, and globalization that allowed foreign capital to engage with Indian economy. I argue that Indian capitalist class find that Indian state supports them enough to engage with global capital. So it helps both global capital and Indian national capitalist class with the expansion of new economic reforms after 1991. So for the first time, RBI, Reserve Bank of India, which is the central bank, which approved Microfinance Limited, a public company, which was registered on 25th of July, 1983. And this led to the expansion of microfinance institutions. NABARD, which helped self-help groups by linking banks with the self-help groups and microfinance institutions in Odisha from 1994 onwards. So Microfinance Institutions Network was created in October 2009. If you look at these networks, who are the people who manage these networks? These people come from the higher caste. Most of them are Brahmins. Most of them are from the urban areas. Most of them are men. Most of them are from higher class, and they have university education. So I call them self-help groups in terms of helping their own self to seek salary. So these networks were further expanded in Odisha with the government of India, government of Odisha. I'm sorry, I'm still coughing. So the government of Odisha started Mission Shakti. Mission Shakti is a self-help group led by women. Women's self-help group is called Mission Shakti, which was set up by the government of Odisha in 2001. And they also started, expanding the microfinance networks, reaching out to the unbanked areas of the state. And then comes the Malagan Committee Report 2011, which started putting restrictions on microfinance institutions, because by now people get to know that these institutions are fictitious institutions and people started losing money. So government started putting restrictions on microfinance institutions, but till today, microfinance institutions continue to grow. So you can see that all over India, in all states, microfinance institutions have huge base, and they have both statewide and nationwide networks. Odisha stands in the 10th in terms of its microfinance institutional base. This is the data from 2013. I did not find any data for last, last 9 years. So if you look at growth trends of microfinance institutions in India, microfinance institutions in Odisha, in terms of agencies, most of these microfinance institutions, around 54% of microfinance institutions are affiliated with commercial banks. Nearly 58% of loan were provided by the commercial banks to tap the small savings and provide credit to the rural poor. The circulation of credit led to the loss of freedom, loss of livelihood. Many people have committed suicide in the rural areas by taking microfinance loans from the commercial banks. Only 38% of microfinance institutions are affiliated with regional rural banks supported by the government, both national and state governments. Only 8% of microfinance institutions are cooperative by nature. You can see that the rest of the microfinance institutions really dominated by the commercial banks, and these regional rural banks also have links with commercial banks. So there is nothing novel, there is nothing sacred about these microfinance institutions. They serve the capital, they do not serve the poor. Here what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to locate the modes of interaction between these microfinance institutions and how these networks between banks, NGOs, voluntary organizations, civil society organizations, and self-help groups works. These NGOs and voluntary organization groups, civil society organization groups form the self-help groups. Government help them. Government monitors them, monitors the self-help groups. Banks provides them the credit, and self-help groups provide them the savings. So that's a circulation of credit and savings of rural poor with the help of self-help groups. And who monitors them? NGOs monitor them. Who finance them? It is financed by particularly both commercial banks and state-owned banks. The Federation of Non-Governmental Organizations, civil society organizations provide credit to the self-help groups, and the self-help groups provide support. The banks provide support to the self-help groups to circulate credits and drag the savings of the people to their fold. So basically, you can see that these organizations help to develop the network between self-help groups, microfinance institutions, and commercial banks. Again, it was further expanded by the government. The government of Odisha started Mission Shakti program. Mission Shakti is a program where women lead the self-help groups. Government provides them, free, very interest-free loans by which the capital can circulate among the rural poor, rural women. There are, 3-tier system. In the top of the first, it starts with local villages, then then in the block levels, then it moves to the state levels. So, it organizes lenders and it organizes in a way where the state provides security for the circulation of capital with the help of the self-help groups organized by women. And it's a policy of the government of Odisha called Mission Shakti. So basically, governments, the welfare functions are being outsourced to the people through these policies, through these networks who organize microfinance institutions. Here, I'll take you to a district called Gajapati district in Odisha. There's a massive growth of self-help groups, women's self-help groups through Mission Shakti programs. I'll tell you the story of this district at the end of my talk, why I have picked up this district. This district is a home to a large number of poor people in the state. Again, I'll come back to this district later. So if you look at this social network, you will find that this fraternal capitalist accumulation in rural Odisha takes place through microfinance institutions organized by higher caste people, higher class people, and these are urbanites, these are male, and they have larger say in these operations of microfinance institutions. And who defends these kind of affiliations? This is where the global networks comes in. DFID is, as we know, Department for International Development, funded by the government, UK government. They also get support from World Bank. The German GTA also, basically GTA helps, it is one of the German federally owned international cooperation enterprise. They also provide support to DFID. DFID provides, again, German largest state-owned bank, and that is KfW also provides support. Small SIDB, small development banks, NABARD, all these organizations come together under a program called Access. Access is organized by DFID. They call it as Access Development Services. It is basically owned by DFID, and DFID Access organizes another organization called Business Development Services, BDS. And BDS operates in the Ganjam district of Odisha to promote microfinance in the name of promoting livelihood missions. So these organizations are further supported by CGAP. CGAP, if you look at CGAP's website, CGAP is basically supported by the World Bank, and its hub is in Washington DC. It's completely it has base all over the world. They say they are going for supporting the rural poor. Citibanks also support this global part. Citibank is part of this global partnership. Unilever, IFC, International Finance Corporation, again part of the World Bank Group. South Asian Network of Microfinance Institutions. This is again organized by French civil society organizations. Actually, it's controlled by the French civil society organizations. NABARD, Rabobank is a bank in Netherlands. UNDP, Oxfam, HSBC, Acted. Again, if you look at Acted, Acted is basically Agency for Technical Cooperation and Development, commonly known as Acted, is a French humanitarian non-governmental organization. Again, Acted controls actually the South Asia microfinance network. DFID, again, ECO is organized by Christian Aid. It's called Code Aid in Netherlands. Code Aid basically it's a Christian aid agency. So all these organizations are coming together with the help of DFID, and DFID has an organization called Access Development Services. So these organizations come together to tap the small savings of rural poor, and they take away the savings. They take away the savings of the rural poor and put people under the mountain of credit. So why do these organizations, global organizations, in the name of supporting poor, do all this? Because it helps global capitalism to solve its internal contradictions. It helps the network of microfinance institutions provide strong institutional policy framework with the help of state, with the help of global capitalist agencies and organizations for the capitalist accumulation process, creating regimes, structures, and conditions in the rural areas of Odisha by solving three inherent problems of capitalism: the historical contradictions between capital and labor, and the gaps in the process of production, circulation, with the help of network of microfinance institutions that controls the savings and expand credit to control labor power. It also solves, I don't think it solves the problem permanently, but temporarily it solves the problem of capitalist competitions and instability in the capitalist structures of circulation and associated risks. It actually reduces the risk and spreads the risk to the rural poor. It also solves the conflicts in the process of accumulation of surplus value. I don't think these contradictions of capitalism can be solved, but it provides temporary relief. That's the language I will use. I don't think the internal contradictions of capitalism can be solved permanently. The microfinance networks provides temporary solutions, temporary relief to capitalism by tapping the savings of the rural poor. So you can see that how these organizations play a major role from local, regional to international level, how these microfinance institutions help in creating a fraternal framework between the organizations based in London, Netherlands, Washington, D.C., in Paris, with the rural district like Gajapati district of Odisha, where people suffer in poverty, hunger, and starvation deaths. So this paper is very, I'm not saying, it provides kind of justice to the title, because it would be good to know how much money comes back, how much money these organizations invest, and how much money they get back from these people. Actually, I applied under the Right to Information Act, and I did not get any reply. So I need money and time, I think, to know how much money they get back in quantitative terms. So these are the networks I wanted to share with you. These networks create challenges for the rural poor, and who helps them? People like us, those who are part of the civil society, the the NGO leaders, the government agencies, I'm sorry, I'm coughing. I'm just trying to recover from COVID for last 15 days. And the dry cough doesn't help to explain how these organizations operate in the rural area in the name of poverty eradication programs. The governments fundamentally provides the security, the agencies provide infrastructure, and the local government agencies provide, again, the infrastructure, institutional framework. The governments provides policies that creates the regimes and institutional support for fraternal capitalism to grow in rural areas, rural Odisha. So I'm sorry, I'm struggling to open my mouth. It's just after 15 days of COVID, I'm trying to talk. So what I would like to do, this is where I want to end my talk, and it would be good to interact, and I hope I can explain it better during the interaction. Thank you. Thank you, Yuliya, for inviting me. Thank you, David, for organizing, and thank you all for your participation.
Thank you so much, Bhabani.
Thank you. Yeah, that was really great. Thank you very much. It was very clear. Thanks for keep going, even though and joining us, even though you've been unwell. Thanks very much. Okay, so Yuliya, straight over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. So I've made some comments. It's work in progress, and I've looked at Bhabani's earlier work, and we have in the chat, we have a link to Bhabani's book that David mentioned at the beginning about Hindu fundamentalism and the spirit of capitalism in India, Hinduization of tribals in Kalahandi during the new economic reform. And the reason, Bhabani is a very prolific writer, the reason I picked this specific book to suggest to whoever is with us today and whoever will be watching this later, is because I think that that book specifically, Bhabani, provides quite a lot of context to specifically the kind of problematic that you were discussing here today, kind of the context in which Indian society and individual states are embroiled from rural to the national level, and indeed specifically the role of religion in the economic doctrine. As fortune will have it, so to say, actually earlier today I was teaching seminars on the history of economic thought, and we were looking at texts from Ibn Khaldun, but also we were looking at specifically the kind of the large swaths of evolution of the of economic thought in India, and we were mentioning laws of Manu and Kautiya. So that was completely coincidental. But one of the things that we were discussing with my students and what they found peculiar was that they said when they read a chapter from Mukaddima from Khaldun, they said, oh, you know, there is just so much religion. It doesn't sound. It was strange for an economic text to have references to God. And we had a whole conversation about actually how much religion or various religions lurk in economic thought, even when that isn't mentioned, and the role of secularism and dominant economic theoretical narratives in sort of like in wrapping our eyes in cotton wool, so to speak, so that we do not see very clearly where religion is. And of course, I threw a few mentions of the Protestant ethic in there, just so that they get an idea of where moralization of the deserving and undeserving poor comes in, where austerity comes in, how interest rates are being set for the poor higher than they are for the rich in capitalist economies. So just kind of a little bit of a grain of salt when we're thinking of so-called secular economic science, that it actually isn't as secular as one may want to think. And I think amongst other reasons, this is why your work is so valuable, because you do take this, you use it in your work elsewhere, that you take an interdisciplinary and ideally post-disciplinary approach to study in India, because indeed, if you do take specific theoretical narratives and try to kind of stick within disciplines, so to speak, as they were developed, and a lot of them were shaped by colonial thought, it's impossible to grasp the complexity of what you have at hand studying this fascinating and hopeful and at the same time tragic terrain, and this paradox of plenty and destitution alongside natural, human and economic wealth. That must be as fascinating to study as it must be quite traumatic for somebody coming from Odisha, seeing what kind of injustice is being done and what kind of legitimizing narratives are being used for that injustice. So I'm really thankful that you came to talk to us about this, but also to educate us, because indeed, as David suggested at the beginning, that David said in the beginning already, the kind of the terrain of the talks that we have at this network also needs to be rejected in the line with decolonizing of narratives. We need to be talking more about areas outside Europe. And you know, our destiny is that the network started as part of European Sociological Association, but it doesn't have to be limited to that, and it shouldn't be indeed, because we're all poor if we do. But anyway, coming back to your amazing paper, I really like what you said, that you know there are a lot of unsavory, predatory, if you like, interest-making, money-making practices in microfinance, and indeed religious writings are being used to legitimize those expropriatory practices, and that that is not sinful somehow, impoverishing people, driving them to suicide. And indeed, I teach about microfinance and poverty on the business ethics course, and I give students news articles about people who are being driven to selling organs, who were driven to committing suicide by this so-called emancipatory logic of entrepreneurship and microfinance that have been paraded presented by the World Bank as some sort of panacea that can save these unbankable people who somehow were poor because it was their own fault or something like that. Yeah, so I show those narratives, those stories to students who are in complete disbelief and shock unless they actually are from India and they do have an idea. So it's really good to see you bring this perspective also in such an interdisciplinary presentation. Because poverty very often is being treated internationally because international institutions are still undersigned by the principles of neo-colonial economic science of what and how is right to do and what's moral and what's immoral and who deserves to be helped and who isn't, and what is the acceptable form of help and what isn't acceptable form of help. So exposing the evil of the microfinance and also exposing the hierarchy of social actors who found themselves yet another niche through which they can expropriate is so valuable. I found it absolutely illuminating as I found it quite disheartening and shocking, I have to be honest. And with the, I found it very illuminating when you were talking about, when you were discussing how this, the burden of poverty through these microfinance initiatives, how with them spreading, there is this sort of shifting of burden of systemic responsibility for their impoverishment onto their individual selves, onto those who have been dispossessed and exploited. And again, these the kind of the connections between the elite links and legitimizing narratives and the pre-existing systems of class and caste and gendered hierarchies is extremely important. What I found, and I would invite you to maybe comment on this now, or maybe tell us later when you have found more time to do this work. I do not know how advanced you are in this. Is this specifically, I found it quite interesting, where there's this outsourcing of welfare functions and these kind of extra levels of expropriation are being created through this explosion of microfinance initiatives and this so-called self-help groups. And also, like, you know, what a cheerful way of calling, oh, we are going to help ourselves because we shouldn't rely on the mommy or papi state. And we all know what that is. That's the process through which a new space is being created where accumulation of capital can continue going on. And you've mentioned this in your concluding remarks that, you know, once the limits of the possible in the current regime of accumulation are about to be hit, new space needs to be created, new kind of niches where further expropriation can happen needs to be created. And the story that you told us today is illuminating, not just to understand what's happening in India, but to understand how the capitalist system works altogether, because those spaces have to be created all the time. And we see that with encroachment on public services and privatization around the world. And I don't want to distract from India, it's just kind of, it's a comment that, you know, it's a story that tells us about the mechanics of capitalism. And with the nuances of it unraveling in India, especially in the rural communities who have been robbed generation in, generation out. So it would be, I want to thank you for your historically important work and for educating us about what's happening in India. But also telling us about these mechanics of capitalism and how these kind of, you have this combination of old texts on tracts on economics and some religious structures and hierarchies and gendered hierarchies, how no combination is sinful enough apart from socialism if a new legitimizing narrative for exploitation is to be constructed. So I just invite you to tell us a little bit more also about that area that you were telling us that you've picked for your case study. Why specifically that area? And also you mentioned something about the HDI measurements. I wanted you to tell us a little bit more the kind of the problem that you have with the HDI measurements as something that can potentially capture what actually is happening in terms of social and socioeconomic situation in Odisha. Thank you very much. That's my comment.
Thank you, Yuliya.
I'm going to stop recording now as well. So if that's okay, unless you want to respond directly and I can carry on recording. we're going to stop at some point and then just open to the floor for a discussion. So do you want to respond first?
Maybe Bhabani wants to respond right
Yes,
away before we open it further, then it makes sense to record the answer.
Please.
Thank you, Yuliya. I don't think I could have put it in better terms. On your question on how this government policies, particularly government of Odisha's policies on Mission Shakti. Mission Shakti talks about empowering rural women through these self-help groups. Basically, these self-help groups, Mission Shakti program, government of Odisha's program, helps for the circulation of credit among the rural poor. So even if government of Odisha says it's interest-free loan, it provides interest-free loan to the self-help groups. But at the end of the day, the government of Odisha borrows from the open market and from the banks. So it falls on the state, it falls on the people. So self-help group is not a project. It reminds me, tobacco companies, talking about women's empowerment through smoking, Edward Bernays' work on propaganda. The government says that Mission Shakti is one of the leading programs which can empower women. In reality, it entangles women with credit frameworks of the banks through the self-help groups. And so the government are not only outsourcing their welfare functions of empowering rural poor, rural women, they're also trying to entangle this rural women, rural poor within the credit framework that capitalism is trying to expand. If you look at the network of these global agencies through Access is basically funded by the DFID. DFID is organized and funded by the UK government. You will find that these agencies work with the microfinance networks, with the governments to expand this credit network. Why Gajapati district in Odisha? Because I talked about an organization called Business Development Services. Again, this is owned by Access, based in Delhi, based in London. Actually, the BDS, Business Development Service, is based in Gajapati district of Odisha. So I thought, it will be good to have this whole network to develop my narrative in the paper, where I can show evidence how Access in London works in Delhi and works in the local areas of Odisha, and helps in bringing together these agencies, these networks, where credit can circulate among working poor, credit can circulate among the people who are not staying or engaging with formal banking systems in India, in Odisha. These are the reasons I picked up this district. And there are lots of microfinance institutions in Gajapati district of Odisha. It has the highest number of microfinance I'm sorry. It has the highest number of microfinance institutions in the state. That's why I picked up the district. Thank you, Yuliya.